Hello everybody, welcome back to MyPhysical World and GIS side by side. We are still looking at QGIS 3.4 on the left and ArcMap 10.7 on the right. Remember last time from our last video, we created a tornado swath for this tornado that hit Hayesville, Kansas back in 1999, 20 years ago. And I showed you how to make a basic polygon with both these GIS superpowers. And we also created a center line or a line feature class. So we created two new shapefiles. So we have the tornado path and the swath. We did that for both QGIS and ArcMap. Alright, now what I've done since last time is I kind of recolored our properties for our swaths and gave them a kind of a rose color and a 50% transparency, just so you can see the underlying aerial photos that were taken that next day. Now, one thing that I did since the last video was I created a new shapefile. I went in and got more accurate in terms of making the polygon, but I created the polygon following the same steps as we did before. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this swath off on both of them, and I'm going to bring in that new layer that I created, that I saved, and I called that heavy damage. So we're going to go right here, select heavy damage, and I'm going to drop that above where the swath was, because that's actually our new swath. So there I added it in QGIS, and now I'll come over here and add it in ArcMap, heavy damage. It's the exact same shapefile. Alright, and if you'll notice, the shape is a lot different than it was when we created our rough polygon. Okay, that's just so we can get more accurate information. Now, when we were really doing this in the real world, we were constantly making updates to our projected tornado swath at that time, because remember, we were doing it live right after the tornado hit. That all night. It hit around 7:30 in the evening, and we worked all night getting data back from the emergency management department with their first responders. And we adjusted that swath throughout the night based on new information that kept coming in. Now, we don't have that luxury right now, because we're just kind of using the software just so you can see how different steps go in GIS. But I did go ahead and go in deep, did some zooming in and things like that, and created a more accurate representation of the damage. And this is noticeable damage from an aerial photo. It's not data that came back from people on the ground like we did in the real world 20 years ago. So I just used the photo to try to identify buildings that had major damage, that they were either destroyed or parts of the building were gone, things like that. However, tornadoes create residual damage outside of that heavy, because you have a lot of flying debris. And we're going to use a tool, and it's a buffer tool. We are going to make a new shapefile off of this tornado swath that is newly created, but we're going to expand it out a certain distance to grab any information that might be moderate damage, all right? But we can do that with the built-in software, all right? So we're going to go to QGIS and we're going to create a 150-foot buffer around our swath. I'm going to turn off the center line. Turn off the center line on both of them. All right, so we have a swath here, but I know that there's damage outside of this area. It's partial damage, it's moderate damage, whatever, but we want to create a polygon that would represent that. And we're going to use what is called the buffer tool. So in QGIS, you'll go up to vector. We're going to highlight heavy damage, and we're going to go up to vector, and we're going to drop down here to geoprocessing tools, and we're going to select buffer. By having our layer highlighted, it already fills it in for the input layer in QGIS. The only thing I need to do is come down here to the distance and change this to 150 feet. Make sure that says feet. I don't really worry about any of this information down here. This is just cartographic information and things like that. We won't worry about that in these videos. But I want to buffer 150 feet around this heavy damage one. Okay, so I set that 150 feet, make sure I have heavy damage as my input layer, and I'm just going to create a temporary layer. I can actually create a shape file, but I'm just going to create a temporary file. That means if I shut down QGIS, I'll lose that data, but that's okay. We're just going to do this for now. So we'll hit run, and then bam, you notice it just put another polygon onto our map, and it's called buffered. Now that's a larger polygon than the heavy damage, so we'll drop the buffer down underneath heavy damage, and you notice that we have heavy damage, and then outside of that we have a 150-foot buffer that goes around that polygon, and that would most likely hit areas that have missing shingles, you know, knock down chimneys, that kind of stuff, but it wasn't totally destroyed. Now cartographically, we're going to kind of fix things here so this looks a little better. So we're going to go to heavy damage, double click on that. We're going to go to its symbol, and we're going to turn it red, and we're not going to have an outline. We don't need an outline for that. Oops, I want this. Yeah, stroke color. I don't really need a stroke color for that. And we're going to hit OK. Okay. And then we're going to go to buffered, and we're going to double click that. And we're going to change that to more of like, let's see, an orange for moderate. And we're going to remove the outline for that too, just for cartographic case. Okay, so now I have a swath that gives me heavy damage inside the red area and moderate damage inside the orange area. Okay, I think we can probably cartographically enhance this a little bit. We're going to go down to layer rendering, and we're going to make our transparency, we're going to make it 50%. We'll apply that, and then we're going to select our heavy damage, basically do the same thing, come down here to layer rendering and make that 50%. That way you can see the aerial photo that's underneath it. Okay, so now we have a pretty accurate representation of heavy damage and moderate damage. You could actually do another buffer for light damage, maybe some shingles missing, you know, trees stripped of leaves, that kind of stuff. So there could be another band that you can go out and extract data. Okay, and we did that 20 years ago. We refined this and made bands of known damage as it got further out. All right, so let's come over here to ArcMap and basically do the exact same thing. All right, so we're going to go to heavy damage. Now we want to create a buffer around that. So we go over here to geoprocessing tools, and buffer is right there because it's a commonly used tool. All right, now what's different is we have some additional form fields to fill out. So we have to actually select our input, which is the heavy damage, and it'll take a little bit to populate that in ArcMap. Okay, so it brings in our heavy damage, and then it wants an output feature class, and by default it does in your user directory. But what we're going to do is we are going to put it actually in the directory that we want, and we're going to give it a name. We're going to call it moderate damage. Okay, we're going to save that, and that populates our field. So we're going to get a new shapefile in this case. Unlike QGIS, where it creates a temporary buffer layer, we could have made a permanent one in QGIS, but I didn't. But I want to show you that you can create a permanent shapefile here. You can do it in both QGIS and ArcMap. So I did it in ArcMap. All right, now for distance, we need to come down here and type in our 150 feet. Okay. And all of this, again, is cartographic information, other types of stuff, dissolving and things like that we're not going to talk about. So we're going to create a 150-foot buffer, and we hit OK. And then ArcMap is going to work on it for a while. It does take ArcMap a little longer to do its work. Okay? If you notice, when we did it in QGIS, it just popped in really quick. So ArcMap takes a little longer for it to generate that buffer. Okay, just finished. All right, so we're gonna move it down in the tree, and we're gonna cartographically change it to look like the QGIS version. So I come over here to symbology. We're working on the heavy damage, and we're gonna make that red. And we're not going to have an outline on that. No outline, no color. Okay. And we're going to hit OK. And then there we have our red. Now to change the transparency, we go over to this display tab in the properties and type in 50% for the transparency and hit enter. Okay. Then we're going to come down to moderate damage, double click on its properties. And well, we can go ahead and do transparency since it's right there on that tab. And then we're going to go over to symbology, and we're going to select our orange, which let's do that one. Remove the outline color, hit OK, and then hit OK, and now we have an identical map in ArcMap. All right, so that was the next step. I'm trying to make these videos as short as possible so you can grasp the information. All right, so our next step in our Tornado application, so to speak, for both QGIS and ArcMap, we created our polygons in the first video in our center line. Second video, I used an enhanced polygon based on what I could see zooming in and out and creating my polygon. You'd create the polygon the same way. You just zoom in, zoom out, and pan through the photo to go around all the houses and stuff like that, create these polygons. I created heavy damage because you can definitely see it from the photograph, from the 1999 aerial photo. But I also wanted to get the probability of areas outlying that had moderate damage, and instead of digitizing or making a polygon by hand, we used the software using the buffer command to create that new polygon. So now we have two polygons. We have a heavy damage and we have a moderate damage. The next video, we're going to use these buffers, and we are going to go into our parcel layer and our building footprint layer, and we're going to extract data from that to move us closer to the end of our analysis. All right. Hey, I thank you for coming, and we will see you on part 3. See you later.